Hello students, welcome to today's module on memory. I am your course coordinator Dr. Navjot Kamal. Let us now see what is a memory, an essential part of any computer system. Refers to the physical device that is used to store information temporarily for the immediate use in a computer, like RAM, the random access memory, or the ROM, that is the read-only memory. Dear students, we know that the most modern computers are built on von Neumann model, which is centered on memory, means the program being executed by the processor at the given time are stored in memory. Why important for you to know about the memory? Since memory forensics, sometimes referred as the memory analysis, plays an important role to have vital information when system is on, which can provide unique insights into the runtime system activities, including open networks connections and recently performed activities, which may include browsing history or chat messages, hacking activities. So, digital forensic experts are always keen to take an image of RAM at the point of collection of evidence. Dear students, actually computers have two kinds of memory. One is primary memory and second is secondary. A primary storage memory, which is also referred as the internal memory, main storage. Why called as primary memory? Because it is directly accessed by the processor and holds the memory for a short period of time. While a computer is running, RAM, that is random access memory, and ROM, the read-only memory, are the example of primary storage memory. Then there is special high-speed memory called cache, which act as fast storage buffer in microprocessor, is also a type of primary memory, whereas secondary memory, which is not directly accessed by the processor, known as storage, like the hard disk drives, used to store files when they are not needed by the processor. So, mind it, disk storage is not a memory, which is very commonly confused by many computer users. So, if someone asks you how much memory is there in your computer, which often ranges between 1 gigabyte to around 16 gigabyte or more, represent the RAM capacity, whereas the hard disk storage goes from gigabytes to terabytes. In other words, you always have more hard drive space than the RAM. Primary memory is always the main consideration while purchasing a computer. Whenever you go to purchase a system, you always ask for RAM specification because it relates to the performance, speed, efficiency of your system. Like in humans, a good memory is always appreciated, which is the capacity of human mind to store and remember information. Similarly, it is true for computing system also. Better is the RAM, better it would be. Basically, adding more RAMs makes your computer able to have more application opened at the same time. I know you must be having question that why so many different type of the computer memory. When there is permanent memory, what is the role of primary memory? So, the answer is to increase the efficiency of the processor so that it can work faster. Let me make you understand the role of primary memory with a very simple example. Tell me, do you go to supermarket every time you plan to cook something? The answer is no, it is highly impractical. Moreover, if you are so fond of going to supermarket, it would take lot of time. Rather, we have ready to use pantry, where we assemble all the requirements of daily needs. Either you want to cook a special cake for your kids or you are planning for a special dinner. You have everything in your pantry. Same role is played by primary memory, that is RAM, in a computer system, which act as a temporary warehouse for the information that a processor needs. So, every time a user asks processor to perform a task, the processor does not go to hard disk for required data. Rather, RAM fetches it from hard disk and stores the necessary programs and instructions for the processor at the given point of time. A processor would go to hard disk for data. It would obviously take long time for a processor to accomplish a job. So, there is hierarchy of memory to facilitate the work of processor to increase speed, efficiency and output. So, when you start a program, your processor give a command to retrieve the program from the hard drive. Once the files are retrieved, the system needs a workplace to manipulate the data and allow you to interact with it. This digital countertop is your RAM. Your system places your programs in RAM or the digital countertop temporarily while you are working with them, so that the processor can access the information faster and more easily. Let us now go through the detail about various types of the primary memories. Memory, as mentioned, is the computer's working storage. One of the important concepts in computing, as it decides the number of tasks that are performed simultaneously at the given point. Talking about the history of the memory, we started with the Celestron tube, an early form of computer memory developed by RCA, the Radio Corporation of America. The original 4096-bit Celestron was very large in size vacuum tube, which stored digital data as electrostatic charges using technology similar to the Williams tube storage device. These tubes, like electronic bulbs, produce a lot of heat and the installation used to fuse frequently. Then first generation computer also used magnetic drums for memory, also referred as the drum. It is a metal cylindrical coated with magnetic iron oxide material on which data and programs can be stored. They were widely used in 1960s as the main working memory of the computer. In the mid of 1950s, they acquired the capacity of around 10 kilobytes in comparison to present day gigabyte capacity. Their size was huge, usually accommodated in the entire rooms. They were very expensive and consumed lot of electricity and generated a lot of heat, which often posed problems. Then we had another type of memory used around 1960, which was based on the small ring shaped magnetic material called as the magnetic core. Depending upon the direction of the current through the input windings, the core would become magnetized in either clockwise or counterclockwise direction. Thus, each magnetic core was capable of storing one digit, either 0 or 1. With the passage of time and with the innovation of transistor integrated circuits, the technology for storing the memory has altogether changed. It has become more and more compact. Presently, we are working on semiconductor type of memories or IC memories, which are static, lighter, cheaper than the magnetic core memories. However, they are volatile and data is lost as soon as power is switched off. Semiconductor type of memories can be divided into volatile type, that is RAM, and the non-volatile type, that is ROM or read-only memory. Let us study in detail about RAM. The RAM is a type of read-write memory. So, information can be written and read from the random access memory. It is volatile, means retains the information as long as power is supplied. There are two types of the RAMs used in modern computer, that is DRAM and SRAM. DRAM or the dynamic random access memory is made up of tiny capacitors that leak electricity. So, DRAM requires recharge every few milliseconds to maintain its data, whereas SRAM, that is static RAM, holds its content as long as power is available. Let us see how the dynamic RAM works in detail. Here, memory is a type of integrated circuit made up of millions of transistors and capacitors arranged in a two-dimensional grid. In most common form of computer memory, that is DRAM, where a transistor and capacitor are paired, to create a memory cell, which represent a single bit of data, and the combination of 8 such cells form 1 byte. Such memory cells are etched on the silicon wafer in an array of column and rows. The intersection of column and rows represent the address of the memory cells. The capacitor is responsible for holding a bit of information, and the transistor acts as a switch that lets the control circuitry on the memory chip to read the capacitor and change its state. A capacitor is like a small bucket that is able to store electrons. To store a 1 in the memory cells, the bucket is filled with electrons. To store a 0, it is emptied. The problem with the capacitor's bucket is that it has leaks. In the matter of few milliseconds, a full bucket becomes empty. Therefore, for a dynamic memory to work, it has to be recharged or refreshed, therefore called as the dynamic random access memory. This refresh operation happens automatically thousands of times per second. Memory cells alone would be useless unless there is some way to get the information in and out of them. So, the specialized circuits are there which perform the function of identifying each row and column, keeping a track of the refresh sequence, that is called counter, reading and restoring the signal from a cell called sense amplifier, telling a cell whether it should take a charge or not, that is write enabling. Other functions of the memory controller include a series of tasks that include identifying the type, speed and amount of the memory and checking the errors. Whereas the static random access memory is based on different technology than the dynamic random access memory, a form of flip-flop memory. A flip-flop is an electronic circuit with 2 stable states that can be used to store binary data. These stored data can be changed by applying varying inputs. A flip-flop for a memory cell takes 4 or 6 transistors along with some wiring, but never has to be refreshed. This makes static random access memory significantly faster than the dynamic RAM. However, because it has more parts, a static memory cell takes up a lot of space on the chip than a dynamic memory cell. Therefore, you get less memory per chip, and that makes static RAM a lot more expensive, used to create CPU speed sensitive cache, again a primary type of the memory. Let us now see how RAM looks. RAMs come in the form of memory module or memory stick or memory board. A memory module is the circuit board that contains DRAMs, integrated circuits, that are installed into the memory slots on a computer motherboard. It comes in different variants like SIM, the single inline memory module, DIMM, the dual inline memory module, and SODIMM, small outline memory module, which is small sized memory module specially designed for laptop, almost half of the length of the regular DIMM. They all serve to store data temporarily while computer is running. Presently, DIMM is the most conventionally type of the memory. Single inline memory module and the dual inline memory modules are basically just different ways of packaging the same silicon memory. The primary difference between these two types of the module is in the number of pins that they have. DIMMs have twice as many pins compared to the SIM. Thus, double or dual or double rows of electrical contacts, that is why they are called as dual inline memory modules. DIMMs use 64-bit data path. Since processor used in most of the personal computer have a 64-bit data width, The RAM come in different capacities. For example, there is 512 megabytes, 4 gigabytes, 8 gigabytes and so on. The amount of random access memory depend on your budget. If you have restricted budget and want to install a computer for personal use, 4 or 8 gigabyte is plenty for most modern operating system. But if you want to work for more on the graphics or want to play video games, you can choose between the 8 to 16 gigabytes. Obviously, it should be compatible with your motherboard. Additionally, some computers support dual channel RAM configuration, means that RAM modules are installed in matched pairs. So, if there is a 512 megabyte RAM card installed, there is another 512 megabyte card installed next to it. Installing RAM in matched pairs speeds up the performance, reduces the heat dissipation, and if one stick does not work, we are going to survive with the other one. Then what is the concept of memory speed? The amount of time that RAM takes to receive a request from the processor and then read or write the data. Generally, the faster the RAM, the faster is the processing speed. RAM speed is measured in megahertz, million of cycles per second, so that it can be compared to your processor's clock speed. There are many brands of the RAM. You can always check for specification of the brand. If two are having the same specification, you can check your budget, and obviously one having the high speed is preferred. Common brands are Corsair, G-Skill, Micron, Semitronics, Kingston, Hynix, Transcend, Samsung, Lenovo and many more. There are other variants of RAM also. You must have heard of CMOS RAM. CMOS RAM is a term for the small amount of memory used by your computer and some other devices to remember the things like hard disk settings. This memory uses a small battery to provide it with the power it needs to maintain the memory contents. There is FPM RAM, Fast Page Mode Dynamic Random Access Memory, the original form of DRAM. Then there is EDOR DRAM, that is Extended Data Out Dynamic Random Access Memory, which is about 5% faster than the fast page mode RAM. Then there is SDRAM, the Synchronous Dynamic Random Access Memory, takes advantage of burst mode of concept to greatly improve the performance. SDRAM is again 5% faster than the EDORAM. Then there is DDR SDRAM, Double Data Rate Synchronous Dynamic Random Access Memory. It is just like SDRAM except that it has higher bandwidth. Then there is VRAM, Video RAM, also known as Multi-Port Dynamic Random Access Memory. It is used specifically for video adapters or 3D accelerators. Let us now talk about the non-volatile type of the memory, the ROM or the read-only memory. In addition to RAM, most computers contain a small amount of ROM memory that contains vital information to operate a computer, because ROM chips are non-volatile and does not lose data even if power is removed. Like programs necessary to boot the system are stored in ROM chips. Many appliances like toys and automobiles use ROM chips to maintain information when power is shut off. Data stored in this chip is either unchangeable or require a special operation to change. ROM, which requires perfect programming at the time of manufacturing of chip. That means you cannot reprogram or rewrite a standard ROM chip. Like RAM, ROM chip also contain grid of columns and rows. It is the junction of column and ROMs that the ROM chips are basically different from the RAM chips. where RAM uses a transistor to turn on or off access to the capacitor at each intersections. ROM uses a diode to connect the lines if the value is 1. If the value is 0, then the lines are not connected at all. There are 5 types of the ROM memory: ROM itself, PROM, EEPROM, EEPROM, and flash memory. Read only memory, as the name suggests, is the read only non-volatile memory, because the information stored is inscribed on the chip at the time of manufacturing. Some chips can be reprogrammed after manufacturing, called as programmable read only memory or PROMs. That is one time process, and such chips cannot be reused. If you want to reuse a programmable ROM, you have to opt for EEPROM, that is erasable programmable ROMs, or EEPROMs, which are electrically erasable PROMs. Then there is flash memory. Flash memory is essentially a EEPROM with an added advantage that data can be written or erased in blocks rather than removing one byte at a time in EEROM. So, makes it faster than EEROM, one of the most popular type of the storage media nowadays because of their low power consumption and more durability, also used in solid state disks. Then there is the concept of virtual memory. As the name suggests, it creates an illusion to the user of very large memory. It is basically a memory management capability of operating system that allows the hardware and software to compensate for physical memory shortages by temporarily transferring the data from random access memory to disk storage. A computer can address more memory than the amount of physically installed on the system. This extra memory is actually called virtual memory. So, dear friends, we stop here. Hope you had a detailed insight about the computer memory, their importance in forensic investigation. So, the practice of RAM capture plays an important role in memory forensic. There is a range of commercial and open source tools designed solely for conducting memory forensics. So, with the help of these tools, field investigator can quickly perform a RAM capture while on scene. The future of memory devices lie in quantum mechanics, where ordinary memory stores information as 1 and zeros. The quantum memory stores a quantum state for later retrieval called as qubits, which would be round the corner in near future. Till then, stay connected. Goodbye.